Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much to the Journalist and Writers Foundation for the invitation to speak here. I'm going to speak on diversity and social inclusion, focusing on the impact of migration. Migration is a source of major diversity in today's world, and it will continue to be so tomorrow. It is often claimed that diversity has a negative impact on social cohesion. The more people in a society differ, the less likely they may be to accept one another and to develop mutual contacts. Is this true? Does diversity negatively affect social cohesion? And if so, what policies can control or even redress this process? Before I shall try to answer these questions, it is important. No, I'm afraid it doesn't work. Sorry. Let's leave it here. Oh, it has changed. Yeah, it's always a surprise. Sorry. Before trying to answer these questions, it is important to understand the scope of migration as a phenomenon. About 250 million people, that's 3.3% of the world's population, live in a country other than their country of birth, and therefore can be called immigrants. Immigrants, however, as you know, are spread quite unevenly over the world. In traditional immigration countries, such as Canada and Australia, well over 20% of the population are immigrants, not including the second generation, that's the children of these immigrants. In the USA and Western Europe, this percentage lies between 10 and 15, while in other countries, often the migrants' countries of origin, it's much lower. There are also countries outside the Western world that attract large numbers of migrants. The Gulf states have the highest share of foreign citizens in the world, up to 85%, while certain states in Western and Southern Africa and in Southeast Asia serve as regional poles of attraction. And don't forget Russia, which houses many people from countries that were part of the former Soviet Union. Large and populous countries such as China, India, Brazil, or Nigeria may not have high numbers of international migrants, but are characterized by a substantial internal migration, often with a comparable social and cultural impact on the original, local, or regional communities. If one includes internal migrants, an estimated 1 billion people, or 15% of the world population, live in an area other than where they were born and raised. It should also be noted, I'm sorry, I have to turn around to check if it works, but it does work. It should also be noted that migration can be a major source of diversity, but it's not the only one. People also differ from one another in many other respects: religion, nationality, gender, race, sexual orientation, education, political preferences, age, skills, you name it, there are many of them. Some of these characteristics are genetically determined, inscribed as we call it. Others may be the result of individual choice of achievement. In the case of migrants, however, several of these characteristics accumulate, so to say: religion, ethnicity, physical traits, unfamiliarity with dominant values and customs, and, very important also, with the local language, often in combination with a relatively weak legal position and social deprivation. Now, back to the question whether diversity has a negative impact on social cohesion. In 2007, Robert Putnam, a reputed US political scientist, published an article called A Pluribus Unum, Diversity and Community in the 21st Century. A pluribus unum, as you will all know, is Latin for out of many, one, the traditional motto of the United States, a long-standing country of immigration. Putnam argued on the basis of empirical evidence that living in an ethnically heterogeneous environment was harmful to interpersonal trust and undermined social connections within and between ethnic groups. Faced with ethnic diversity, people would tend to hunker down, that is, to pull in like a turtle, as he wrote it, or in more common language, to retreat from social life. Under such conditions, ongoing immigration would erode social cohesion. Yeah. Putnam's conclusions received wide attention in the media and among policymakers, serving as input to public policy debates in various countries. His conclusions have also been challenged by literally hundreds of other scholars from all over the world who have carried out similar studies in their own countries. The results of these studies are very mixed. Some confirm his findings, others reject them, and again others find no significant relationship between heterogeneity and social cohesion. This is partly because social cohesion can be interpreted in many different ways. For example, do we measure attitudes vis-à-vis others, or do we measure actual intergroup contacts? It is also due to the fact that countries differ not only in the composition and the history of their immigrant populations, but also in their policy approaches. As a general rule, however, Putnam's findings appear to hold much less often for Europe than they do for the USA. What also matters is the size of the neighborhood. The larger the area under consideration, the less negative the impact of heterogeneity on social cohesion. Social cohesion, therefore, is something that becomes more concrete in the direct, immediate neighborhood. Policies to promote social cohesion, therefore, should primarily take shape at the local, if not at the sublocal level. Yet, such policies should not be limited to the local or the neighborhood level. They should be facilitated by higher levels of governance, the state level, the federal level, or even the international level. The tensions that immigration provokes today in many societies are due not only to a lack of acceptance by the native population, but also to a lack of opportunities for newcomers. This is why public authorities should develop policies to redress the situation. Several of the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN provide clear guidelines for such policies. You see them here on the wall. For example, no poverty, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, reduced inequality, and sustainable cities and communities. Each of these and several others can be translated without much effort into concrete policy measures that, if properly implemented, would benefit immigrants and native populations alike. A crucial condition for more cohesive societies is the granting of a sound legal position to immigrants. And there I agree with the previous speaker. After they have resided in a country for a certain number of years, they should be given a full residential status, preferably of a permanent nature, or even full citizenship. Security of residence provides a perspective to newcomers, and for that reason it is a necessary condition for a fuller participation in a society's major institutions, such as the labor market, housing, education, healthcare, and political system. The principle of equal opportunity should be leading here. After a limited number of years, a so-called probation period, immigrants should have the same rights as everyone else, which obviously implies that they must also have the same obligations. In the liberal democracies of the global north, we can distinguish two basic ways of creating equal opportunity. One is what I would call the Anglo-Saxon way, a strong anti-discrimination legislation combined with efforts of affirmative or positive action to compensate for disadvantage and discrimination encountered in the past or at the present. The other one is the continental European way, which uses the social policy instruments of the welfare state to correct and prevent social deprivation. A drawback of the Anglo-Saxon way is that it spurs feelings of being discriminated against among members of the original population, while a weakness of the welfare state approach is that it creates dependency on the state rather than preventing such dependency. As is so often the case, the ideal solution lies in the middle, I think. Discrimination should be attacked under all circumstances, but affirmative action may be a bridge too far, as many countries have experienced meanwhile. And more than in the past, social policy instruments should be used to encourage a fuller participation of everyone, not only immigrants. It is better to invest in language courses and in education and training for everyone than in financial support of newcomers, though they too should of course be guaranteed a minimum income level. A fuller participation of all members of society, whether immigrant or not, whether at the neighborhood level or at the national level, is indispensable to achieve more social cohesion. Still, this does not come without certain challenges. A major challenge, particularly in the case of immigrants, is that a fuller participation requires a certain degree of cultural adaptation. Opinions differ as to how far this adaptation should go. This is one of the big debates in contemporary society, certainly in liberal democracies. The potential tension between participation and preservation of a separate identity is an issue that keeps coming back in the academic literature, but also in political debates. My Canadian colleagues Will Kimlicka and Michael Benton have labeled this as the tension between recognition of different cultural identities and redistribution of scarce resources and opportunities. Another colleague, Irene Bloemraad, has written about the difficulty of reconciling the granting of rights, the promotion of participation, and the recognition of identity in diverse societies. It is a struggle that we all recognize because we all live in societies characterized by a certain degree of diversity. A certain degree of diversity which is increasing in nearly all cases. What is needed under such circumstances is respect for others and also acceptance of others. That should not be too difficult as long as the other respects and accepts you. But the question is how to act if and when the ideas of the other are disrespectful or are perceived as disrespectful. There are certainly limits to the degree of diversity that a society can accept, but opinions differ on how far such acceptance may reach. There is a clear and probably growing gap here between more cosmopolitan attitudes open to diversity that stems from globalization on the one hand, and more restrictive nationalist attitudes that wish to protect societies as they once were or are perceived to have been, often with populist slogans on the other hand. In short, we can conclude that diversity is on the increase, not the least because of growing immigration. Diversity may challenge social cohesion, but these challenges can be coped with through policies that guarantee a sound legal position, that encourage social participation for everyone, and that promote respectful ways of handling cultural difference. I'm not suggesting, though, that the road ahead will be an easy road to go. Thank you very much.